In the sunshine further east, 25, 26, maybe 27 degrees Celsius in one or two locations, so really quite warm and humid. Then that rain turns a little more persistent, edging in across more of northern England and Scotland, with the risk of further thunderstorms then on Tuesday evening across East Anglia and the southeast. Again, tending to clear away overnight, leading to a largely fine day on a Wednesday. There will be some showers across western parts of Scotland. Again, some coasts may stay a bit misty, and where the breeze is coming in from the sea, it will stay on the cool sides, but although perhaps not quite as warm as Tuesday, we're still looking at temperatures getting over 20 degrees Celsius in places on Wednesday afternoon, before, again, the risk of thunderstorms coming up from France as we go through Wednesday night. Plenty going on.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
I'm Darren McCaffrey, and join me on The Briefing Monday to Thursday at 3 p.m. You'll get your afternoon fix of all the latest political stories, debate and analysis, as well as interviews with some of the biggest names in UK politics.
It's a problem that affects the whole world, Darren.
From Westminster to Cardiff, Edinburgh and Belfast, if it's happening in UK politics, we've got it covered. That's The Briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey, Monday to Thursday, 3 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good afternoon. It is 3 o'clock. You're watching GB News, The Briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey. We're going to go live, first of all, at the top of the hour, though, to Hillsborough Castle, where the Prime Minister's been today, and we're just going to hear from Sinn Féin.
One section of unionism, of political unionism, a veto that is entirely unacceptable. It's a reckless course of action. It's an unacceptable course of action. We have said directly to him what the consequences of that might be. And our absolute dismay that this is where we are at a time where we should be making progress, at a time where we should, and we find ourselves now at the mercies of the DUP by the British government. It is an appalling vista.
Conor McCauley, RTE. Are you any clearer at this point now after your talks on the time frame for the restoration of the executive? Might it be months or might it be years as it was the last time?
We have no clarity bar this absolute clarity and certainty, and that is that the time for the executive is now. The time to appoint a First and Deputy First Minister is now. To appoint a Speaker to the Assembly is now. People have had their election. It's been a long election campaign, goodness knows, and now is the time for back to work. And it's the real kicker, right? There is an established mechanism through the Joint Committee to deal with those elements of the protocol that need to be smoothed out, finessed and altered. The Prime Minister is aware of it, the government in Dublin is aware of that, the European institutions are aware of that, and yet here we find ourselves in a situation where the British Prime Minister is quite willing
Just having technical problems there with the link to Belfast, but that is Mary Lou MacDonald, the leader of Sinn Féin, and talking there at Hillsborough Castle, joined by Michelle O'Neill. Of course, she's the leader of Sinn Féin in the north, in Northern Ireland. She would, of course, become First Minister of Northern Ireland if the Assembly was going to be restored. Boris Johnson is meeting with Sinn Féin and indeed the 5th largest party in Northern Ireland today, trying to get the government back up and running there, but also trying to deal, of course, with the Northern Ireland Protocol. We're going to be talking about that throughout the programme and lots more as well between now and 4 o'clock. But before all of that, let's get a quick update on the latest news. Here's Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon. It is 3 minutes past 3. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date. Of course, as soon as we can bring you back to that press conference, we will do, or we'll update you on what they have to say here. In other news today, though, the policing minister says stop and search helps police combat knife crime, citing that police took almost 50,000 knives off the streets in the past 2 years. The Home Secretary has permanently lifted restrictions on the stop and search powers used by police. Officers now have the right to search people without reasonable grounds in an area where they expect serious violence. Well, the wider use of stop and search has caused concern that it disproportionately affects black and minority ethnic communities. But Mr Malthouse doesn't believe this to be true. The energy price cap could be reviewed every 3 months under new plans by the energy regulator Ofgem. The measures would pass on a fall or a rise in gas prices to households more quickly. Well, the cap is currently at a record high of nearly £2,000 per year for the average household, and it's reviewed every 6 months, each October and April. The Swedish government has announced they've decided to apply for NATO membership. Finland made a similar announcement yesterday as both countries reevaluate their security status as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Speaking today at the Russian-led Collective Security Treaty Organisation, President Vladimir Putin said NATO's expansion was a problem for Russia.
As for the expansion of NATO, yes, it's a problem, which is being created completely artificially, in my opinion, in the United States' foreign policy interests. In general, NATO is being used as a one country's foreign policy tool. It's being made possible consistently, skillfully, and quite aggressively. All of this is just worsening the already difficult global security situation.
McDonald's says it started a process to sell its business in Russia. The fast food giant closed all its restaurants operating in the country in March, having operated there for 30 years. McDonald's says the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine has meant it's no longer tenable to continue business in Russia. GBNews has been told that more than 2,000 people are waiting in areas around the French ports of Calais and Dunkirk to try to make it across the Channel. Our Home and Security editor Mark White has been investigating.
This morning, despite gusts of more than 30 miles an hour in the Channel, people smugglers were still shoving small migrant boats into the water. This border force rib delivering some of those pulled from a small boat just after 6 a.m. Over the weekend, at least 600 crossed the Channel, but poor conditions led to several rescues of boats in trouble on the French side of the water. There are, we're told, more than 2,000 people waiting in areas around Calais and Dunkirk for the chance to make the crossing. Sources say more are being driven in from cities, including Lille, on a daily basis. Despite confirmation from the Prime Minister over the weekend that the first 50 would-be asylum seekers have been notified they'll be flown to Rwanda within a fortnight, there appears, for now at least, to be no reduction in the numbers determined to cross. Mark White, GB News.
The London mayor says he feels incredibly safe after reportedly being named on a kill list by a US shooting suspect. Sadiq Khan was listed in a 180-page manifesto called Kill High-Profile Enemies that had been published online by Peyton Gendron. Gendron's accused of shooting dead 10 people at a supermarket in the US city of Buffalo on Saturday. As school students across the country start their end-of-year exams today, head teachers have raised concerns about a lack of invigilators. The Association of School and College Leaders found a third of schools hadn't been able to recruit enough people to supervise GCSEs and A-levels over the summer. They say increased anxiety in pupils, who've then requested to sit exams in separate rooms, plus invigilators' concerns about catching COVID, were some of the reasons behind the shortages. You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the briefing with Darren.
A very good afternoon and welcome to the Briefing PM, an hour of the latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm Darren McCaffrey. Here's what's coming up over the next hour. As we've seen, the Prime Minister is in Belfast today to try and get Northern Ireland's Assembly back up and running again. We're covering this throughout the programme and talking to the former Conservative leader, Ian Duncan-Smith, about what the UK government should do next. The Home Secretary, Bridget Tell, has announced that she's set to give police increased powers to use the controversial stop and search scheme. We'll be speaking to a former Detective Chief Superintendent about whether it's a good idea. And Sadiq Khan's caused somewhat of a stink amongst Labour Party members after being pictured in a legal cannabis farm in California and calling for the UK to have an adult discussion on drugs reforms. Is he right? Or is he completely mad? We'll be talking about that. You can email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk about that and many other things. Or you can tweet me at gbnews. That and so much more between now and 4. But first, as you may well have seen at the start of the programme, we got a little bit of a gist there of what Sinn Féin was saying at Hillsborough Castle in Northern Ireland. Today, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, is there. It comes as the government tomorrow is poised to introduce legislation that would allow ministers here in London to override parts of the Brexit deal on the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Prime Minister, as I say, is trying to talk to all the major parties to try and get the Northern Ireland Assembly back up and running again. Of course, the DUP, the largest unionist party, is refusing to enter the Assembly until the government takes substantial action on that protocol. Let's get a different view on all of this now. Let's get the view from Brussels and bring in journalist Jack Parrick, who joins us from there. Jack, very good afternoon to you. First of all, just give us a sense of what the mood there is in Brussels about some of the language we've heard used in recent days from the government here, and indeed this idea about introducing legislation that in theory means they could override that protocol unilaterally.
Well, at the moment, Darren, it's good to be with you. At the moment, the European Commission has stayed relatively quiet on this. We heard from Maros Sefcovic, who's the Brexit negotiator in the European Commission, last week, saying that any unilateral action on the protocol would be totally unacceptable. And today in Brussels, we've got a meeting of EU foreign ministers, and the Irish foreign minister, Simon Coveney, has been here. And I think he really sort of at the moment is speaking on behalf of the rest of the European Union countries. Everybody's looking to the Irish for guidance on this, essentially. And he was quite conciliatory. He said that while any sort of legislation against the protocol would be unacceptable, he sort of was calling for the EU and the UK to sit down together again, to negotiate, to start having these discussions around it. He even accepted that parts of the protocol simply aren't working and that they do need to be resolved. And I think that's really what is happening from the Brussels side. It's a bit of a wait and see at the moment. We understand Boris Johnson's going to make this big announcement tomorrow, but from what I'm hearing, most of this announcement is going to be actually a bit of sort of buying time rather than actually tabling any serious legislation to change the protocol that would then cause some big effects and big reactions here in Brussels in the EU.
Big effects indeed. And in many ways, people think that Boris Johnson, Jack, is trying to call Brussels bluff in the sense that they know that if they suspend parts of the protocol about the border and the Irish Sea, that in theory, actually Brussels won't then impose those checks on the Irish border because of the deal and the sensitivities around this. Is that the sense in Brussels, that Boris Johnson in some ways is taking a gamble, but a gamble that he knows in the end the EU is not likely to fold on this idea that they would then start imposing these checks elsewhere?
Yeah, well, this is the big gamble, isn't it, essentially, Darren? You know this well as well. The sort of discussions over Brexit, over the trade deal and the withdrawal agreement was seen from an EU perspective. They sort of sat tight and waited for the UK to perhaps build up the tension and the pressure to push into the officials here in Brussels to see if they would react. And we all know that the EU, under no circumstances, wants a hard border on the border of Ireland, on the island of Ireland, and that they're probably unwilling to go that far. The question is, if there is legislation tabled, what happens in the European Union then? Do they start imposing targeted trade tariffs? That would be tantamount to a trade war, obviously, and that would be a big issue from an EU side. And it would also then start to raise questions about EU division, because they would have to do some sort of targeted measures. Would they put measures on cars? Who would that affect? The Germans, would they be happy about that? And how would they start negotiating them? Frankly, Darren, outside of Brussels, in the EU capitals, many of the leaders are not interested in getting into this kind of discussion at the moment, especially with the war in Ukraine going on in the east.
Well, just finally on that, because this is what I was going to ask you next, has the war in Ukraine made a difference here, Jack? Has there a sense, and we've seen, the response from Eastern European states in particular, but also that agreement last week with Sweden and Finland, that the UK is taking somewhat of a lead in all of this, and then in the end there's a feeling that there are actually bigger issues at play here, i.e. there's a war in Europe?
This is exactly it. Simon Coveney, on the way into this foreign ministers meeting, he said, these issues seem minor in comparison to the Ukraine-Russia war at the moment. And I think that is the sense. There's been very little appetite among any of the leaders of the European Union to enter back into this fray, enter back into renegotiating any parts of the Brexit deal, especially the Northern Ireland Protocol, which was so sensitively, from their point of view, agreed to and was seen as the resolution, and the UK signed up to it and accepted it. They saw it as a done deal. With everything going on in Ukraine now, there's a feeling that they just do not want to get into this fray, get into these battles again, when they've got so many refugees coming over the border into some of the Eastern European countries. There's a lot of money going in there. There's battles over the Germans, obviously not supplying the Ukrainians with weapons, how they deal with the energy after Russia cut off the energy taps to Poland and Bulgaria. There's so much more going on that European countries want to deal with. But having said that, they obviously still don't want this concern if there was any, persistent trouble in Northern Ireland, specifically regarding understanding that Northern Ireland does need an executive for this all to function properly.
Great analysis, as always. Jack Parrock, thank you very much indeed for joining us there from Brussels. Thank you, Jack. Let's move on now away from Northern Ireland, but we will be returning to it a little bit later in the programme and talking about the possibility of an EU trade war as well with Ian Duncan-Smith. But let's talk about the migrant crisis in the Channel, because more than 600 have reached the UK by boat over the weekend, according to the Ministry of Defence. On Sunday, some 436 people crossed the English Channel, with 167 on Saturday. It's the highest number in a single day since the government announced plans to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda. It's fair to say, I think, that deterrent so far clearly not working. It comes, as GBNews has been told, more than 2,000 people are waiting around Calais and Dunkirk on that French coast to make their journey across the Channel, and more are being driven to the area daily. Mark White, our Home Affairs security editor, been across this for years, frankly, Mark, not just today. When I say years, give us again a sense of where we're at, because we've already had, I think, is it 8,000 so far this year, which is not just a record number, it's a smashing all previous records.
Yeah, more than 8,000 so far this year, which is double the figure for last year. And of course, Last year was a record
high
level, as we got 28,500 people who'd crossed the English Channel in small boats, and it had been doubling and tripling really for the past few years. Previously, what we'd seen was the clandestines, as the Home Office would refer to them, people crossing by irregular means, would come on the backs of lorries. When they started really making the port of Dover and other ports into a fortress in terms of the checks that they were carrying out, the backs of lorries, using carbon dioxide probes to check for people hiding in the backs of lorries. It became much more difficult for migrants to get that way, and that's when they switched, of course, to the small boats issue. It wasn't much of an issue for the first year or two, but it certainly is now.
And we should just say the pictures that people are seeing, if they're watching on TV, were shot today from our camera crews down there.
Yeah, today and over the weekend. This is the Dungeness lifeboat west of Dover on the beach there, as it often does. That's where it comes into the beach and offloads the migrants. They come up the beach there. A very significant day yesterday with more than 130 who crossed yesterday, 600 over the weekend. And the conditions weren't ideal, particularly yesterday. We had squally, thundery showers in the channel. Today it's gusting about 30 miles an hour, but we still had a boat that came in first thing this morning with 20 migrants on board.
And the pictures that we're seeing there, I mean, these are the migrants that have been rescued, but they're all migrants who obviously make it ashore without having to be rescued.
Yes, well, according to the Ministry of Defence, they're not aware of any that have got to UK shores undetected. Now, of course, it's the Ministry of Defence, the Royal Navy, that's in charge of command and control. They've got drones up, they've got naval vessels, so they think they've got eyes on the vessels that are coming across, the small boats, and they're managing to intercept, so far, all of them before they get to the UK coastline. I should say on the other side, in France, because of the quite horrific weather conditions in trying to push off, on Sunday, yesterday, they had half a dozen vessels that got into, small boats that got into difficulties, and they had to launch full-scale rescue operations to rescue those people who got into difficulties just off the French coast, and quite a few people taken to hospital suffering from hypothermia.
A reminder of just how dangerous that journey is. Just very finally, quickly, Mark, politically, where does this leave us? Because, you know, the government of Trump, this deal with Rwanda, has been acted as a deterrent. No one's obviously been sent to Rwanda yet. But frankly, I mean, if it's the deterrent's not working now, when does the government expect it to kick in, if it is ever going to kick in?
Well, to be fair to the government, one, they don't say that this is the answer to all the problems. It's not a panacea, they say. It's part of a solution that they hope will break the model of the people smugglers. And, of course, it's not kicked in yet. So I think we really need to wait until the first flights start going to Rwanda before we can say, well, the deterrent effect has either worked or it hasn't worked. In the meantime, while no one's actually being sent to Rwanda, of course, they're on the other side of the channel, in their thousands, paying the criminal gags. They're still going to come and take their chances.
OK. Mark, as always, thank you very much indeed. Mark White there, Home Affairs and Security Editor in the studio. OK, we're going to pause there on the briefing, 20 minutes past 3 o'clock. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're going to be talking to a Ukrainian MP who is live in the studio, having come over from Ukraine. But also we're going to talk about stop and search. It is back, increased powers for the police. Is it a good idea? We'll be talking about that in just a couple of minutes. But first, we talk about the weather, haven't we, just now? Here's an update. It's going to be pretty hot tomorrow by the looks of things. The Net Office down in Exeter.
Hello, I'm Alex Deacon with your latest weather update. Plenty going on this week. Some very warm sunshine at times, but also the likelihood of further thunderstorms. We've had some overnights. We've got some more again this afternoon. Low pressure is dominating out to the west, drawing up the warm and at times quite humid air. And we are seeing some thunderstorms along this weather front, pushing their way steadily northwards. Met Office yellow warning in place. Torrential rain is possible, parts of northern England, Northern Ireland especially, before they tend to fizzle out through the evening. Rain may persist across the far north of Scotland, But for most, it turns into a dry night, clear spells, a little bit misty in places, and temperatures mostly holding up in double figures. On to Tuesday, and for some, a very warm day. A fine, bright day for much of the Midlands, northern and eastern England, a good part of Scotland as well. But the east coast of Scotland could stay a little misty and murky. And further west, we have cloud increasing, some rain at times for Northern Ireland, pushing into western Scotland and western parts of Wales, the far southwest of England, also likely to see a bit of rain during Tuesday. And with the cloud and rain, temperatures suppressed, but in the sunshine further east, 25, 26, maybe 27 degrees Celsius in one or two locations, so really quite warm and humid. Then that rain turns a little more persistent, edging in across more of northern England and Scotland, with the risk of further thunderstorms then on Tuesday evening across East Anglia and the southeast. Again, tending to clear away overnight, leading to a largely fine day on a Wednesday. There will be some showers across western parts of Scotland. Again, some coasts may stay a bit misty, and where the breeze is coming in from the sea, it will stay on the cool sides, but although perhaps not quite as warm as Tuesday, we're still looking at temperatures getting over 20 degrees Celsius in places on Wednesday afternoon, before, again, the risk of thunderstorms coming up from France as we go through Wednesday night. Plenty going on.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
Very welcome back. It is 25 minutes past 3 o'clock on this Monday afternoon. We're on TV, online and, of course, on your DAB digital radio. GB Views, by the way, gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at GB News. We'll get to some of those a little later on in the programme, whether it's about Northern Ireland, about changes to what is happening with stop and search, or indeed the migrant crisis we're talking about with Mark White a little bit earlier. But let's turn to what the Home Secretary has been talking about today and over the weekend, and that is that she wants to permanently lift the restrictions on stop and search powers that have been in place since 2014. The controversial reforms include a change to the threshold that would be required. Section 60 authorisation can only be given when there is a belief amongst the police that there is potential serious violence and that it will occur. But in future, that belief may well change to may occur. Well, earlier on Breakfast here on GBNews, we spoke to the Minister in charge, Rachel McLean, and we started by asking her what the government hopes to achieve with these changes.
Well, what we want to see is increased confidence from the police to bring in these Section 60 powers, ultimately to save lives and keep our streets safer. What we've set out in the Beating Crime Plan is that we are determined to crack down on the scourge of knife crime. I, as a Home Office Minister, I often have to speak to bereaved families who've lost their child, and I can't imagine how awful that can be, that fear that your child may walk out of the door and not come back because they're a victim of knife crime. So this is a really helpful tool. It does allow the police to put the Section 60 in place where they believe there will be a risk of serious violence, and we believe it will ultimately keep people safer and save lives.
In the year to March, according to Home Office figures, there were 9,230 stop and searches. Do you know what percentage of those resulted in arrests?
Out of that figure, I don't know, but I do know that we have taken 50,000 knives off the street in that time, and we've arrested 150,000 additional suspects. And so it is clear that the work that we are carrying out in the Home Office is bearing down on these statistics, and we have seen a reduction in stabbings as a result of that. However, we clearly need to do more, which is why we've listened to our policing partners and why we've taken these actions.
The number of stop and search, 9,230 stop and searches in the year to March 2021, 4% of them resulted in arrests, and that's the same as the previous year. So it doesn't seem like stop and searches necessarily results in more arrests, and certainly not more being charged.
Well, out of all those people, there were people arrested, and suspects were arrested out of those numbers that you've just mentioned. But clearly we need to do more. Stop and search is one tool, but there are a range of other measures that we are introducing and working through as part of the Beating Crime Plan, including bearing down on crime in all its forms. We're putting those long-term measures in place to actually divert young people away from a life of crime. So it's an overall system response. But stop and search, to be clear, it's very important. It's what the police have asked for. They've asked for these measures. We've listened to the police, and we're backing them to continue cracking down on knife crime in our cities and streets.
Rachel McLean, I want to ask you now about the cost of living crisis that we as a nation are all enduring. Are our viewers and our listeners all too aware of, what's more to come on this very issue? But I understand this morning you've been giving advice to people who are struggling that people should take on more hours or move to a better paid job. I have to say, I think that's going to fall on, very unresponsive ears, if I may suggest. Do you want to retract or change that statement at all?
I think you've slightly taken that out of context. What we have provided is tailored support. First of all, we provided holistic support, £22 billion of support across the economy. We've also doubled that support that's available in local areas. And the remarks that I made about people taking on more hours are part of our plan to help people get back into work. We've got a very good record of helping people get back into work after the COVID crisis, and also to enable them to, if they want to, and it's right for them, to increase their skills, which is why we have our job coaches in the job centres. They will be the best place to work with that individual, to assess their situation and help them if it's right for them. Clearly it's not right for everybody, but what we've heard in the past is that sometimes it has been difficult for people to take on more hours or move to a full-time job. But this is about an overall package of measures, working with our job coaches in the job centres and making sure that we've got that targeted support available, whatever the individual situation is.
That package of measures that you've just mentioned, is that enough?
So it's evolving all the time, and we, as I said, we've put in £22 billion worth, and some of those measures are being phased in. So we've taken action on energy bills, on council tax. We are actually taking people out of some of those tax brackets as well, and there is further help coming later on in the autumn. But the Chancellor's always been clear that he will keep the whole situation under review. We saw that was his approach during the global pandemic, an unprecedented shock to our economy. So he's working, as are all cabinet ministers and are all government ministers, to look at what further steps can be taken.
There you go. That was Rachel McLean speaking a little bit earlier about police powers and the cost of living crisis. Lots of you can get in touch, by the way, gbviews at gbnews.uk on Northern Ireland. Evan says Boris needs to finally scrap this protocol once and for all. He's against Russian annexing part of Ukraine, yet he's fine for the EU to annex Northern Ireland. Stop using this war in Ukraine as an excuse for inaction. I think it must be pointed out that, of course, the UK agreed to the Northern Ireland Protocol. Robert says, why does Boris Johnson and the UK government care more about Ukraine than it does about Northern Ireland? And on what's happening, of course, with the migrant crisis, Barbara says the French must be laughing at us. If they can intercept boats in difficulty, surely they can intercept boats when it's not difficult. We are stupid. They're trying to get rid of their problem by passing it on to Great Britain, and our government is frightened. To be blunt with Macron, the Tories will be hit at the next election, though it's never sensible to let Labour in. GBviews at gbnews.uk, or indeed tweet us at GBnews. OK, we're going to pause there. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're going to have a member of the Ukrainian parliament in the studio. It comes, of course, as reports have suggested that Ukrainian troops may well have pushed Russian troops back to their own border. Plus, we're speaking to Ian Duncan-Smith and a lot more. But before all of that, just after 3:30, here's the latest headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 3:33. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date. The Prime Minister is in Belfast holding emergency talks with Northern Ireland's leaders in a bid to break the Stormont deadlock. Sinn Féin President Mary Lou McDonald said her party had had a fairly tough meeting with Boris.
What is clear is that the British Prime Minister has created the impression, at least, that he is minded to get rid of the protocol. Now, that clearly is not possible. Legally, that is not permissible. It's a reckless course of action. It's an unacceptable course of action. We have said directly to him what the consequences of that might be, and our absolute dismay that this is where we are at a time where we should be making progress.
The Swedish government has announced they've decided to apply for NATO membership. Finland made a similar announcement yesterday. President Vladimir Putin says the expansion of military infrastructure in either Nordic country would demand a reaction from Moscow. The policing minister says stop and search helps police combat knife crime, citing that police took almost 50,000 knives off the streets in the past 2 years. Well, the Home Secretary's permanently lifted restrictions on police stop and search powers. Officers now have the right to search people without reasonable grounds in an area where they expect serious violence. The London mayor says he feels incredibly safe after reportedly being named on a kill list by a US shooting suspect. Peyton Gendron's accused of shooting dead 10 people at a supermarket in the US city of Buffalo, New York, on Saturday. The Queen received a standing ovation on the last day of the Royal Windsor Horse Show. She was there for a star-studded celebration of her Platinum Jubilee in the grounds of Windsor Castle. It's her first public outing since March, having missed the state opening of Parliament due to mobility issues. You're up to date on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. Shortly, we'll be back to Darren for the briefing.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is £1 to 20. I'm sorry, we'll update you with these figures shortly.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very welcome back to GB News. Let's focus on Ukraine now, because troops there have reportedly reached the border with Russia after a counterattack near the city of Kharkiv. That's Ukraine's second largest and the home to 1.4 million people. The city has proved extremely difficult for Russian troops to gain a foothold in, and the failure to conquer the city could be seen as a defeat for Putin's regime, according to US intelligence officials. It comes as a Kremlin spokesperson has said that Russia was closely watching Sweden and Finland's bids to join NATO, and he was convinced that their accession would not strengthen the security of Europe, something clearly they disagree with. Well, delighted to say that joining me now in the studio is a MP, a member of the Ukrainian Parliament that we've had on many times on GB News. That's Alexei Gorcharenko, and we've been speaking to him on the phone many times in different parts of Ukraine. Delighted to say that you're in London with us this afternoon.
Also, I'm delighted to be in your studio. Thank you.
No, thank you. Just give us what's taking you to London? What are you doing when you are here?
I have a number of meetings with my colleagues, British members of the Parliament, and also officials, politicians, and I have two topics. Number one, we need to win. And what we need weapons. And still, yes, some weapons are coming, but we need more, especially air defense, aircrafts, long-range artillery. That is topic number one. Yes, we have a lot of successes. Like you told, we won the battle for Kharkiv. That is the second largest city. Like before, we won the battle for Kiev, which is the capital and the biggest city. Also, we are very effective on the sea. But still, Russians have advantage in the air, and they're using it just to attack kindergartens, schools, hospitals, and that is something important for us to change. And secondly, after the victory, we need to rebuild the country, and for this we need funding. And the UK is the place where there are billions and billions of pounds assets. I mean, villas, homes, businesses, Russian oligarchs, Russian propagandists, all these around Putin with their dirty money. All of this should be frozen and confiscated in favor of Ukraine. It is Russia who should pay for this awful devastation of Ukraine, not British taxpayers, not French or American taxpayers. That should be Russians. They are guilty for this. They should pay. That is the second topic for me.
And are you getting a good response here? Are people listening? Are we in many ways doing enough, do you feel?
First of all, I would like to thank United Kingdom and British people and British government for all support we are receiving, and I can tell you absolutely frankly, not because I'm on British TV, that UK shows leadership in this, and we appreciate it enormously, and thank you very much for this. But we think that more can be done, especially in the area of these frozen assets, because we understand that that will be a process. This process will take time, so sooner we will start, better, and also not to give possibility to these people to hide away this dirty money, in some way to leave the UK, to run away. So that is important. And I see the support from my colleagues here, and I'm very thankful for this.
Do you fear, though, that, this war, we look at it, and we're looking at pictures of it now, we feel that, it's only 11 weeks old, but in reality, it's actually 8 years old.
Yes.
Isn't the concern, your concern, that actually this is just going to become a very, very, very long war, that Russia won't give up in the Donbass region in particular, and having captured Mariupol, that they will now just dig in and that this war could go on for years and years and years?
First of all, thank you for mentioning Mariupol. That is also my, address, appeal, and what I'm speaking about with my colleagues to save people who are there, because still hundreds of our heroes are there, and we should do everything we can to save them. Speaking about how long this war could be, nobody knows, let's be frank. But we see that Russia is failing, every operation they start, every move they try to do. Let's remember, end of February, many were sure in the West that Ukraine will fail in several days. But now you see that Ukraine is not only holding the ground, but is kicking them off. Really, we are now on the border near Kharkiv, and I hope that we will go further. So I believe that we can finish it quite quickly with Western weapons and Western support. It is possible. And also Putin, there will be a day when Putin should recognize that he can't achieve his goals. He can't achieve his goals.
So what is victory? Because we heard yesterday from Jens Stoltenberg, the NATO Secretary General, saying that NATO can win, or NATO will win this war, I should say. But what does winning the war mean? Does it mean going back to where we were in February 2022? Does it mean pushing Russians out of the Donbass region? Does it mean getting back Crimea? Where for you does war?
You absolutely rightfully said that it started in 2014. It is the 9th year of war. So the victory in this war is the full liberation of Ukrainian territory, including Crimea and including Donbass. I would be happy I wear this traditional shirt Ukrainian because also to celebrate our victory in Eurovision, and the second is the UK.
Wow.
And the second is the UK, which is a very good sign. I think we should be the best two in everywhere. So, and I want that next year we would host Eurovision, now as a winner, in Ukraine and Crimea. That is what I hope, that what is I am dreaming of. But I understand that it can take time. But the final victory is the full liberation of our country. We are not going to give up any inch of our territory. But for the start, like a first stage, it should be coming back to the line before February 24, and we're ready to continue some political discussions and negotiations, but about full liberation of our country. That is how we see it, and I'm sure that will happen. The question is time.
And just very finally, what's the mood amongst Ukrainian people? We were talking during the commercial break about how, if you go to Lviv, in many ways, it doesn't feel like there's a war on at all. Ukraine is a massive country geographically. But ultimately, we're 11, 12 weeks into this war now. Has the public mood in Ukraine changed?
Very high moral. People believe in victory. People see that we are winning, that that Russians, they are failing everything. And that is a very high moral. But certainly, the second is people are tired, that the war is difficult. And even in Lviv or Western Ukraine, there are still missile attacks. And that's why I told about air and sky. So we believe in our victory, but certainly we want it as quick as possible. And millions of people are suffering. They are living outside of their homes, separated with their families. That is very hard. Okay. And that is why, again, thank you very much for British people, for all humanitarian aid, and for hosting our refugees.
Well, no, thank you very much indeed for coming in today. Really appreciate it.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
the rest of the time you're in London. Alexei, thank you very much
thank you.
For joining us here on GB News. Thank you. OK, let's return now to Northern Ireland. We know that the Prime Minister is there today trying to get the Northern Ireland Assembly back up and running again. Sir Ian Smith, of course, former leader of the Conservative Party, Conservative MP, joins me down the line. Ian, thank you very much, as always, for joining us here on GB News. First of all, do you agree with the Prime Minister's strategy, which seems out of line, if you like, with the DUP, which is very much to change the protocol rather than to scrap it altogether?
Well, these are words, so let's have a look. What is the protocol? The protocol is an agreement between the EU and the UK government as to how Northern Ireland can be sustained, and more importantly, how you can sustain the Good Friday Agreement, which has been the critical component of keeping peace and allowing Northern Ireland to move forward. So that's the name. The question is what's in it? And the reality right now is the protocol, as agreed, is fundamentally flawed. But something that goes missing almost every time is that within the protocol as it exists at the moment, there are two very critical clauses. Clause 13, subparagraph 8 is very clear. It says that the protocol can be changed in whole or in part if both parties agree to do that. And the second one, of course, is Article 16, where there are diversions of trade and also social and economic problems that exist. All of those are in place now. There are real issues about trade imbalances, and problems about people shifting their trade to other areas, including the south of Ireland. And also the other point is that there is an alternative on the table, which is what this bill will do, which is to change the protocol.
But isn't it the problem in many ways, and this is kind of slightly the catch-22, is in the end that when Brexit was going to happen, one side or the other weren't going to be happy, because obviously if there was going to be, and we know the whole point of Brexit was about essentially having more control ourselves. And so those checks, if they were on the island of Ireland, nationalists would have been furious. Now they're in the Irish Sea, unionists are furious. And in the end, you know, the protocol is a compromise, and it's a compromise that, frankly, is supported by the majority of politicians and indeed the public in Northern Ireland, because they see it as a deal that, OK, not perfect, but fundamentally is better than the alternative.
Well, that's actually not altogether true. It's polling shows that the majority of the public in Northern Ireland do not like the protocol because it's caused real restrictions on them in trade terms. Also, it's important. What was the whole purpose of the protocol? It was to support the Good Friday Agreement. That was the idea, that we would keep the Good Friday Agreement, and therefore that would mean that Northern Ireland remains settled. What it has managed to do, because of the peculiar interpretation taken by the EU over everything, the reality is now that the Good Friday Agreement is under threat. The unionists talk quite clearly and quite rightly about the issue of consent, which is critical to the Good Friday Agreement, that no policy, no article should be brought forward without the consent of both communities. And this is clearly not the case here. And that is the problem right now. It's causing damage, it's causing division, and it's causing economic harm to Northern Ireland. And remember, the UK, rather Northern Ireland, remains an integral part of the United Kingdom. But peculiarly, the EU has insisted on all measures being adopted from the EU and adjudicated by the Court of Justice, which is peculiar, and that all that process needs to be changed dramatically.
No, I get that, but again, you'd know what nationalists would turn around and say about that, about consent, is that, and Northern Ireland is a particularly unique part of the UK, is that there was no consent for Brexit. That obviously nationalists didn't agree with Brexit, and in fact, the majority of people in Northern Ireland didn't agree with it. So there's a feeling, isn't there, from one side that consent is used with a protocol, but it was never used with why the protocol was needed in the first place.
No. This is very different, because the Brexit was a pan-United Kingdom vote all over the United Kingdom about whether people wish to stay in the EU or to plough a different course. And the majority of the United Kingdom, which includes Northern Ireland, actually voted to leave. So that isn't a process that requires consent, because consent was granted on the basis that everybody took part in that process as a member of the United Kingdom. The issue around the protocol is, as the UK left the EU, it was how to make sure that the Good Friday Agreement, this is what the EU and the Americans said, at all costs we must protect the Good Friday Agreement. This protocol actually damages the Good Friday Agreement quite significantly, as it's dividing communities in a way that hasn't happened for some considerable time. So, it's important to recognize that those who believe in the Union, which is the majority, the later poll shows the vast majority of people in Northern Ireland still wish to remain in the United Kingdom. So on that basis, what we have to do is come up with something that finds its balance in this. And this is not the protocol as it exists today, because it doesn't have that balance. It requires huge checks. Bear in mind that the cross-border trade is 0.2% of all the trade, and yet it has more checks now than any other part of the EU. It's ridiculous, because the idea of smuggling through Ireland is an absurdity, because the cost would be so high. It's far more onerous than east-west trade that comes between Ireland and the UK, which is almost less than a quarter of the time it takes to clear lorries. So all of this is ridiculous and needs to be changed.
Can I just ask you very quickly and very finally, do you think, though, at the very least, because this is what the Prime Minister seemed to be suggesting today in his column in the Belfast Telegraph, that ultimately the protocol should be de-linked or decoupled from the negotiations or the need for restoration of government in Northern Ireland? Because if the election showed anything 2 weeks ago, is that most people want to see the Assembly up and running again.
Yeah, I'm sure that that's what he would like, and that's what most people would like. But I don't think it's going to happen, because the DUP has made it very clear that there is a problem here, and they can't go back into cooperation in government in Northern Ireland until this is changed. So, in a sense, the UK government's got to get off its backside and get on with it to make these changes, and either agree with the EU to do that, or to do them unilaterally on our side of the border. The only part of this debate that is threatening a hard border is the EU. It's not the UK. The UK has always said that border will remain open for transport and goods, etc. There's not going to be checks on that border, no matter what, from our side of the fence. It's only the EU that threatens that, which tells you all you need to know about their real desire.
OK, Ian Douglas-Smith, as always, really appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on GB News. Let's end the programme talking about cannabis, if we can. Bit of a change of direction there. Labour figures in Westminster are said to be furious after photos emerged of Sadiq Khan on a legalised cannabis farm in California this week, along with the announcement of a new drugs commission to review UK law. Well, delighted to say joining me in the studio to talk about this is the head of operations at Volface, Katia Kowalski. That's right. Kowalski. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. So Sadiq Khan in California, as much talked about here in London, looking at cannabis rules. Just remind us what the rules are here in the UK.
In terms of where the kind of legal status of cannabis stands.
Because is it illegal?
Yeah, it's still very much illegal. It's legal for medical use under medical prescription, but recreational use is illegal, and it's not decriminalised at this point in time either.
But there have been suggestions that police forces in certain parts of the country have not been necessarily enforcing the law as rigorously as they would do with other laws.
Yeah, there's kind of there's diversion schemes set up across the country. Obviously, there was talk of a potential pilot scheme being launched in London to investigate diversion as well. So this means kind of diverting young people, or people in general, away from being criminalised and towards diversionary measures like education programs, treatment programs, to kind of tackle their drug use.
In saying that, of course, critics would say that, frankly, cannabis, first of all, is harmful in itself, but there are other drugs that are illegal that are harmful, but then also it is a gateway drug onto much harder substances.
Well, I mean, I'm not disagreeing that cannabis is harmful. I mean, any drug has the potential for addiction and can cause harm. But I would disagree with the statement that cannabis is a gateway drug. I think the only thing that really makes it a gateway drug is the fact that it's illegal. So people that are accessing cannabis off the illicit market, the black market, dealers are often selling other drugs that are, harder, such as cocaine and such.
Yeah, but that is strange in the sense that you would have thought that clearly, obviously, a legal substance would be more likely to be consumed, no? So more people would probably consume cannabis if it was legal.
Well, that's potentially possible, but when you look at...
So you would increase harm, surely?
Not necessarily. I think when we look to evidence like Canada legalised in 2018, and there hasn't actually been much of an increase in use generally amongst the general population. And when you look at harms, risky cannabis use behaviour has gone down, and young people that are accessing cannabis has also gone down. Because obviously, when you legalise and regulate a substance, you can regulate, who consumes it and who's allowed to buy it. At this point in time, no one's regulating whether young people are buying cannabis off the illicit market.
Okay.
Yeah.
Katia, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you this afternoon. OK, that is it from me on GB News. I'm back, of course, at 3 tomorrow. Colin Brazier's up next, but first, here's the weather.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update. Plenty going on this week. Some very warm sunshine at times, but also the likelihood of further thunderstorms. We've had some overnights. We've got some more again this afternoon. Low pressure is dominating out to the west, drawing up the warm and at times quite humid air. And we are seeing some thunderstorms along this weather front, pushing their way steadily northwards.